everybody, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be going over how to deploy a full stack React application on the Render website. Basically what Render is a service that hosts databases and websites. There's more to it, but that's essentially what it does, and that's what we're going to use it for today. I'm making this video because I cannot find any good content on how to launch a web service. There's some pretty good stuff about static sites on Render, which is basically a simplified website. You know, you can click on stuff, maybe a blog, but there's not really a whole lot of interactability. So if you're building a full stack interactive web service, you're going to want to do that, and there's really no documentation on that I can find. So I'm going to do it. First thing you want to do is sign in. I usually use GitHub to sign in. That way it has access to all of the repositories you have, which is super helpful. So we're going to sign in. I actually have some services right now. I'm working on an app, but we're going to pretend like I don't have that. You're going to want to click New and then select Web Service. As I said, static sites are not what we're looking for right now. We're going to do a web service. So you want to build and deploy from a Git repository. Click Next. And here you're going to see all of your repositories. You can scroll through them. I have quite a few. We're going to connect to this one. And this is just going to connect to your GitHub and pull all of the code from that. We're going to give this a name. Probably, I'm already using this for another repo, but that's fine. You're going to want to name it something that is relevant to the app. Pick the branch. You might have like a deployment or a production branch on your app. I just use main. We're not going to change the root directory. You can basically tell it where to run all of the code that you type in down here. These are your commands. This basically tells it where to run these commands, but we're going to leave that. Pick your runtime. It has a few different ones here. I'm using Node, so we're going to click Node. And we move on to the build and start commands. These are super vital to the web service and why it's kind of difficult to do sometimes. The build command is, I'm using npm, so that's what we're going to use. I'm going to write npm install and npm run build. Now what these do is the first one installs all of the dependencies for the project. So if you're using NodeMon or bcrypt or .env or pg, any of the extra libraries and stuff you use from Node Package Manager are going to be installed. And then this script is unique sometimes. Sometimes it's different, but most of the time it's just npm run build, especially for a React app. If you want to find your scripts, you can go in here. Ignore all of this ridiculous files and folders. You're going to want to go to your package.json file, and look at your scripts. So right now I have a start, I have a build, and this is the command we're seeing now. If you run this command here, if you run this script, what it does is it creates a bundled package of your application. You can see this here in the dist folder. This was created when I ran npm run build. It has an index.html and assets. It has bundled CSS and JavaScript. You can see all this messy nonsense. So these files are what is served to the client. And ideally in your server code, sorry, we'll go back to this. Ideally in your server code you have app.use express.static with the dist folder here being the argument to the call. You may, depending on your setup, you may have a build folder instead of a dist folder. I'm using React and Vite, so that gives me a dist folder when I run my build script. You might get a build folder. What's important is you're serving the dist or build folder in your server code. Moving back here, you're building it, which gives it the dist, and then here the start command is going to be node server.js. This assumes that your server file is named server.js and it's in the root directory. It's probably not. So like in my folder, I know I have src/ backend/server.js. So you're going to want to give it an absolute path, and you're just going to run your server code, and that's all it is. So you want npm install to get all of your dependencies, npm run build to create that distribution or build folder for render to use, and then the start command starts your server code. It listens on a port and uses that express.static call to the dist folder created during this step. These two steps are vitally important. This will gum up your whole app and make it extremely difficult, and these are ultimately why I made this video, because I cannot find a whole lot of documentation that kind of lays it out clearly, and I would have liked that when I was learning. So moving on, you can click an instance type if you would really like to pay for your web service. It's just going to be more responsive, a little faster. I'm cool with free. I'm not being paid for any of this, so free it is. And then you can click create web service. I already have one called Lit Lobby, so we're going to go check that out. And this is a log. You have some each of the events here, all of the deploys in the history. What's important here, if you're using a Postgres database like I do, you want to go to the environment and make sure that you have an environment variable for your database connection pool. So I have a key, which is database URL, and then the value being the external connection URL for my Postgres database. And that's found if you go to dashboard, which we have it here, click on the database, and then you can connect here. There's a selection for external URL, external connection URL. You want to paste that in the value slot here, and that will allow your server to connect to your database in a production environment. That's just a little bonus tip if you're running a Postgres database also hosted on Render, but if not, you'll probably want to connect to it in a different way. And that is how you create a Render web service. If you want to do free deployment, but you're not really interested in Render, there is another service called Netlify. And this also has some free options for hosting. I don't think they do Postgres databases, so if you're into that, probably Render is the best bet for free Postgres database hosting. But they do a bunch of good stuff. It's a good platform. I just prefer Render personally, so that's what I use. And thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.
You sure know how to play it. In the car, in the walk, 'cause everyone knows when it calls, baby.